The Conservatives, as we head into this election campaign, keep saying don't vote Labour, don't take us back to square one. Well, today the Conservatives are proposing taking us back to 1947, reintroducing national service, which ended in 1960. It was introduced after the World War II and lasted for 13 years. Rishi Sunak says he wants to bring it back now for 18-year-olds, a year in the armed forces, or volunteering for one weekend a month, perhaps in the NHS, the police service, the fire service, or for a charity. Is that a good idea to engage the young in their civic duty, or another way to demonise a generation already feeling as if their choice and opportunity in life is restricted in a way that some older generations haven't had to endure? Let me know what you think of the idea of bringing back national service. 0345 6060 973. You can text me 84850 or tweet at LBC. Let's get into this debate, though, with the Conservative MP Tobias Ellwood and also Naomi Smith, who's Chief Executive of Best for Britain, founder of Trade Unlocked and host of the Quiet Riot podcast. Good morning to both of you.
Good morning.
Tobias, I'll start with you, if that's all right, because this is an idea that you have long championed. Why do you think national service would be a good idea for 18-year-olds?
Good morning. Really interesting how you introduced that 1947. It's actually because there's a 1930s feel to the world now. That's why this is important to debate, to have this discussion. And, elections do tend to focus on the economy, how people's finances will be affected. Policy positions surrounding defence and security don't tend to hog the wicket. But as someone who's been warning about how dangerous and contested our world's becoming and calling for an increase in defence spending, reintroducing some form of national service, civilian and military, in addition to the 2.5% GDP target for defence, is really welcome. But it's also a sober recognition, indeed a powerful reminder of the increasingly grim chapter in our history that we've entered that is not dissimilar to the late 1930s. We've got rising authoritarianism, states rearming, new axes of power developing with no international alliance, no global institutions such as the United Nations in control of where global politics is sliding. So we must prepare today and vastly improve our national resilience. It's simply not possible to retain a standing armed force at such high readiness. So there must be an all-of-society approach so we can upgrade our defences at short notice.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think people wouldn't argue with the fact that there is insecurity in the world and in some ways more insecurity than we've experienced in a generation or so. But if you really want to secure Britain, then just invest in the armed forces. I know I'm preaching to the converted here, but the Conservative governments over the years have cut the armed forces. The army's gone down from 100,000 to 73,000. This is just bolstering those armed forces on the cheap.
No, you simply cannot do that. I'm afraid that's too simplistic. You simply cannot pour money into a standing army at high readiness for the entirety of the time. You cannot do that. And there are better models across Europe, particularly in Finland, a very small country with a large border facing Russia. And there, everybody does something very similar that's being proposed here. A short period of duty of learning a set of skills, covering a wide spectrum of capabilities. Warfare is very different from just infantry and cavalry and so forth. There's a lot of grey zone areas of cybersecurity and so forth that needs to be considered as well. And of course, we're now saying not everybody has to do the military side. There is something also about doing something for Britain, a period of duty for your nation, not necessarily, as I say, with the armed forces, where you learn very different skills that may be required, called upon at a later date.
But the risk with that is that the suggestion is that the younger generation need to be taught their civic duty more than older generations, as if the younger generation lacks some sense of civic duty. They're already stereotyped quite often as sort of feckless, unruly generation, more interested in their avocado on toast than they are in saving for a deposit. I mean, this is just all adds to that intergenerational division, doesn't it?
I don't agree with that labelling, but I do agree that over the last 30 years or so, we've had it increasingly easy. We've assumed that the peace that we generally have is for the long term. It is not. The country is usually facing some form of threats in some form. And state-on-state action is back. We're seeing what Russia is doing. We're seeing where China is going. We're seeing what's happening in the Middle East.
I take
what
that
we're
point.
seeing,
And I take that point, Tobias, and I really respect your expertise in this area. But the question about intergenerational fairness, I think, is a valid one here, because we are putting all the burden of that insecurity onto the young. And look, I know there are arguments for younger people stepping up to the armed forces. They are physically very able in that stage of their life, of course. But why are we asking younger people to keep us safe? Why aren't we asking retired people, for example, who have had it pretty good for their generation, to do some of this civic duty? They could volunteer quite easily. In terms of the non-armed forces stuff here, certainly they could volunteer in the NHS. They could volunteer in the police force. Why are we putting all the burden on younger people to volunteer?
So this is exactly why this debate has been launched. This policy proposal has been put forward with the Royal Commission looking at the details. And everything that you've just listed there, I wouldn't disagree with at all. Okay, you mentioned that I'm a reservist. There's a skill set of ex-forces that could easily step in to many of the shoes and some of the work that the 18-year-olds might be required to do. I think that's absolutely right. It shouldn't be just left for the younger generation. The idea, though, is that we don't know when the threat will grow, will increase, will escalate. So as 18-year-olds go through, they are then trained and then armed. That way they can receive a course very, very quickly and upgrade that. So all 18-year-olds will then move through this prism, if you like, of training, whether it be civilian or military, to prepare us for the longevity. We're talking over the next couple of decades. We're talking over the next couple of decades when the threat is going to be far, far greater than we've seen for the last 3 decades. The West's ability, to manage insecurity across the world is severely being tested already. And this is, I think, a wise precaution for the whole of society to recognize that. But I absolutely agree with you. It shouldn't just be for the 18-year-olds, but you have to start somewhere. So 18-year-olds will go through there, but they might be 25 or 30 or 45 when they're called upon to put those skill sets into practice.
OK, well, the Prime Minister's chosen to start with 18-year-olds rather than pensioners, who, of course, go out and vote in far greater numbers than younger people. Let's bring in Naomi Smith here as well, though. Naomi, good morning to you. What do you make of this policy?
I think it smacks of desperation. We have seen the campaign by the Conservatives get off to such a terrible start. And this just feels like a punishment for the young in order to court the voters, who are a very small number, who may still be inclined, although in lesser numbers than previously, to vote Conservative. And these are voters who themselves will not have had to serve their country. You'd have to be 82 to have missed to not have missed the cutoff for the last time we had national service. Paul, young people have been failed terribly by this government. Generational inequality has never been as bad as it is now. They're the first generation to be less well off than their parents. Schools are crumbling with concrete rotting around them. There's a teacher crisis, sky-high tuition fees, rents are eye-watering, home ownership beyond the reach of most. And of course, Brexit has robbed young British people of their ability to study, work and live across 27 other countries. Any serious party would be tackling these issues if they genuinely cared about young Brits.
Why does it have to be seen as a punishment, though? We don't see compulsory education, for example, as a punishment. There are lots of things in life that are compulsory that we think are good for society. Does it have to be seen as a punishment, or could it be seen as an opportunity, a great way for younger people to start their adult lives?
Well, I think several things on this, Paul. First of all, it is ageist. What are we asking older people to do? What are we asking the over 65s to do? Are we asking them, with many of them owning their own home outright without a mortgage, to be taxed at a far higher asset class taxation rate in order to fund the building of new homes for young people? Are we offering these young people anything in return if they were to complete this mandatory, yet somehow mandatory volunteering if they don't take the military route? That seems odd. Are we offering them, subsidised rents and good quality homes? Would they get an exemption on tuition fees if they completed their national service? It's not offering them anything. If anything, it's asking them to do something that perhaps they don't want to do. And as a military man, I'd hope Tobias wouldn't want the military being stuffed full of people that don't actually want to be there.
I suppose that is a point, Tobias. Maybe people would end end up volunteering. I keep saying volunteering. Of course, it's not voluntary. It'll be mandatory. But people being conscripted, although that's a very emotive word, into the armed forces, who don't want to be there. That's not going to be good, is it?
So I've long felt that I think it binds the nation together. We do something quite incredible when everybody at the age of 18, goes through a system, whether it be civilian or military, whether it's working for the Forestry Commission, the NHS, or indeed the armed forces, that you do something not for yourself, but for your nation. I actually think that's a good thing. I think it strengthens character and binds us actually all together. But I go back to the core piece. Please let me finish this point. Please let me finish this point because it's glossed over. I don't disagree with all the challenges that the young are facing. Indeed, the country is facing. It's been a difficult, turbulent period. I, for one, have stood up to many of the challenges that we face. But please let me make this point. Stability only lasts until an alliance of nations that supports our global order outweighs that don't. And the scales are tipping. A failure to address this transition means that war is inevitable. And the period of recent instability that we've had is now over. The world is not yet at war, but we're not at peace. And the blurring of state and non-state actors and the rise of discord in the grey zone means that we have to do something about this.
All right, Naomi.
So, yes, you can say, it should be the pensioners that do it, or you can say it's the youngsters.
Tobias. If you want young people to have a stake in society that they would want to defend, then you have to give them that. If you want to instill good values in young people, then lead by example. But the Conservative Party has overseen one of the most corrupt, sleaze-ridden governments in living memory. If you want to instill good values,
we're moving away from the substantive.
Have two prime ministers who broke COVID. Don't have a prime minister like Liz Truss who blamed everyone but herself for her mistakes. If you want honest, hard-working people, don't be a party that sold Brexit to a nation on a pack of lives.
Okay.
Well, start with the Conservative Party, uphold the Nolan principles, adhere to the law. Then young people might have some of the values that you think are so important that they have that they don't currently.
We wandered way off the subject here, I'm afraid. All these
no, we
points
haven't. It
are
is part
absolutely.
of
Well, you keep
what
interrupting
you're asking young
me.
people to do.
You keep interrupting me. You keep interrupting me.
You
so
interrupted
please allow
me
me
a fair
to finish
amount in that last segment too.
All right, let's stop all the interruptions. Tobias, just respond on this point about the fact that younger people. I think Naomi does have a point. I mean, I know that she's gone into lots of different policy areas there and historical facts about the way the Conservatives have conducted themselves in government. But generally speaking, I think it is a fair point to put to you that younger people don't feel massively engaged because they don't feel like they've got a stake in society. They can't get on the property ladder. They're struggling to find good quality jobs in an age of AI, and that will only get worse. Why should they feel like they have to step up and invest in a country that's not really investing in them?
You need to start this discussion about whether or not there's a requirement to upgrade our defence posture, whether our resilience needs to improve. And if you answer to that question, here you go. Okay, so you're interrupting me again. This doesn't work. You may not like what I say, but you need to respect my right to say it, if that's okay.
Hey, Tobias, just finish your point. And Naomi, hold on for 1 minute, and then I will come back to you to get your response. Tobias, just finish your point, please.
Right. The two discussions clearly are related, but they're also separate. If the first question is our world getting more dangerous, not less, and you say yes to that, you then have to ask yourself, what are you going to do about it? Okay? And that means we do need to advance our defense posture. We can't keep a standing army at high readiness all the time. That we simply unaffordable, absolutely unaffordable. Therefore, we need to look at models that we see across Europe where many do exactly what is being proposed here. This isn't some sort of new scheme, but absolutely right. All these other issues that you've mentioned need to be addressed, but they are slightly separate as to whether our world's getting more dangerous or not. And Naomi, I'm afraid it is.
Tobias, Naomi.
Well, if we accept the premise of your first question about the world becoming more dangerous, and if we do, then under the Conservative government, the size of the armed services under the Conservative Party has fallen from 177,000 in 2010 to 130,000 in 2024, which somewhat undermines the argument that the Conservatives care about our defence. So, it can't be both things. Yes, you may say it's too expensive to keep a standing army. Well, why is it too expensive for an economy as large as ours? Well, I would say that if you hadn't squandered so many billions on scandalous spending, and Better Britain's website has got a scandalous spending tracker detailing all of the crony contracts and missold PPE that have contributed in no small part to absolutely scandalous spending by this government. But also, if reports are to be believed, the Conservative Party intends to pay for this. 1.5 billion of the 2.5 billion, that's a yearly cost, by gutting the post-Brexit Shared Prosperity Fund. That was meant to replace the loss of EU structural funding, which is a diametric opposite of levelling up. Young people in areas that need to be levelled up are now going to see even less going into those areas, into supporting infrastructure and businesses and their future prospects. So if you want to talk about, whether or not we need more defence, well, under the Conservatives, it's been cut. Okay. And if you want to talk about how to spend it, well, you're spending it by robbing Peter to pay Paul.
All right, look, Tobias, I'm sorry, I haven't got time to let you respond to that, but I think you'll agree you've had a fair chunk of interview time this morning, and thank you very much for coming on the show to talk about your views on national service, and thank you to Naomi Smith, to their Chief Executive of Best for Britain.